Jon Carruthers-Green, steel market analyst at MEPS International. Welcome back to the Speaking of Steel podcast. We've got a very interesting subject to get our teeth into today, something that we've already covered online and touched on in MEPS steel market reviews. But of course, we've had the European Commission's announcement on the replacement of its steel import safeguard measures, which I know you've got your head straight into.
I'm very glad this is my episode that when I come back. Safeguards really are something I quite like digging into.
Surely after CBAM.
Okay, safeguards and CBAM.
Okay, well, listen, without further ado, we watched the initial announcement the other day. Can you give me a little bit of a preamble into the background as to why we're getting this announcement now? What is the European Commission doing at this stage?
Okay, so the European steel safeguard measures are due to expire in June next year. They've been in place now, or by the time we get to June, they'll be in place for 8 years, which is the maximum amount of time that you can have these in place. There's been a huge amount of worry within the industry, exactly what's going to turn up to replace these. So we finally, after months of waiting and a lot of speculation from just about everybody, we finally got to find out what the replacement was going to be. So 7th of October, 5 p.m. Central Eastern European time, we got to watch the press conference with Stefan Szejn and Maros Sefcovic, where they outlined their proposal for the new measures. And these measures really are going to sort of tighten the import regime into Europe.
And specifically, can you sort of summarise the changes, I guess, then that we might see come July?
Okay, so let's start with how the system sort of currently works. We've got import quotas set for individual product categories and individual countries within that. Once those quotas are exceeded, there's a 25% tariff applied onto any steel that's brought in. So the proposal that came out very recently is to reduce these quotas and to increase this tariff. So the reduction in quotas is going to be down from, I think, a total of around 33 million tonnes per year down to about 18 million tonnes. And then the increase in the tariff is going to go from 25% to 50%. So those are the sort of the two headline figures. There are a couple of other bits that are going to be introduced as well. The proposal included new rules around melt and pour certification. So the steel has to be melted and poured in a specific country for it to count towards its quota. Beyond that, there's a few more sort of tweaks to exactly how they're working. So we were currently in a situation where for a lot of these product categories, any quota that hasn't been used in one particular quarter can get rolled over and used in a following quarter. That's something else that's going to be removed.
It feels like that's aligning it a little bit with the US as well. Is that part of the thinking, do you think, at this point?
I think that this 50%, this tariffs that deal with overcapacity, I think there is a lot of talk, a lot of alignment between not just the US, but also Canada. You've got to remember they've got 50% tariffs. I can see the UK following suit very similar. And there is the Global Excess Steel Capacity Forum that meets quite regularly. And there is these ongoing talks of setting these tariffs at a broad, equal level. So they've got sort of a club for those people that are willing to apply them, and everybody outside that who are potentially producing too much steel in a sort of non-market efficient manner. So I think, yes, there is quite a lot of alignment that's going to be coming from this, and potentially other countries as well.
Okay, so I mean, there's several months between now and this intended application of these measures, but I gather there's quite a few hoops that the European Commission are going to have to jump through, a few boxes to tick, to say the least, before they can actually be approved and implemented. What's the process for that?
So this is currently at the proposal stage, so we're literally right at the beginning. And one of the key concerns was exactly what was going to replace the safeguard measures. like I say before, they can only be in place for 8 years. So there had to be some kind of new mechanism that was going to defend the industry. The problem is, if it's not a safeguard tariff, which has very sort of specific set rules within the WTO, then there is potential for other countries to apply tariffs of an equal euro or dollar amount on your exports, say, from Europe. Now, the complication comes in is that this doesn't necessarily have to be on steel products. This could be anything, just like we saw with the US and their sort of broad tariffs. We saw quite a lot of countries, I mean China in particular, immediately retaliating by applying tariffs on US exports. Soybeans, I think, is the one that's always in the news. So there's going to be a lot of wrangling, I believe, within the EU as to exactly what these measures will look like, because there is that opening where tariffs can then be applied on European exports. So one of the big concerns that we've heard from quite a lot of people recently is that these measures may come in very soon. The actual proposal doesn't include any start date. Everybody sort of kind of assumes that it's going to be taking over from the 1st of July, after the current safeguards expire. And if I was a betting man, that's the date I would pick as well. But because of all of this extra negotiation, it could be done sooner. It could take a lot longer. It could leave the European industry open for some time until all of that's decided.
Yeah, I think it's from the feedback that we've gotten from MEPS researchers is that people in the sector are sort of potentially talking about April. Is that paranoia, or is that a realistic deadline when these things could be introduced?
I think paranoia is probably a little stronger word, but the problem comes with these European announcements in that you get part of the information, and then it's almost like radio silence. And what happens, what fills the void, is everybody's rumours, all the speculation. So, like I say, while there was no official start date, the idea that it could come in sooner, I mean, I've even heard January. So yeah, I think currently this is all rumour, conjecture. I think our best date for starting these new measures is July 1st.
But a lot of negotiation to come. And the last Speaking of Steel podcast, I'm thinking, of course, was automotive themed. I guess, the countries with a large automotive export interest, really, that they'd be particularly worried about any.
Well, this is exactly it, because your countries who potentially retaliate against the EU are going to target those areas where the export volumes are quite large. So yeah, the German automotive industry does have a bit of a sort of a bullseye on it. It's one of those things I would potentially look at if I was a third country.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we're talking about repercussions there, but one of the first things I think you did upon getting hold of the documentation from the European Commission about these proposed plans was to look at some key steel products and potentially what the effects of these new quotas might have on import levels and duties. What did that uncover?
Yeah, so there was only so much information that was included in this proposal. It was a document about sort of 8 pages long, an annex of another 5 pages or so. What it gave you was these total volumes, that 33 million tons. And it also gave you the intention that it wants to bring import share down to 13%. So this is where we went from the facts that we were given to a little bit of analysis, a little bit of conjecture on exactly how that's going to shake out. So we were starting looking at each one of the product categories, and let's take hot rolled coil, for example. So the EU has said that what they want to do is bring imports down to the same level as they were in 2013. They've picked that year because that's in their mind before the issues of Chinese overcapacity really sort of became evident. The other thing they're doing is, so if you think of that 2013 number as the total, Then what they want to do is they want to break up the quotas for each individual country according to a more recent breakdown. So they've taken the years 22 to 24 to give them a guide of who's actually exporting into the EU, and the breakdown will be based on that. So we combined those two numbers. We had a look at the hot rolled coil quota. That was 5.8 million tons. And then the other thing that we did was we followed very similar rules that are currently applied within the safeguard measures for how to allocate different countries. The European Union has said that they want this measure to be WTO compliant. And one of the things that we expect for them to do that is to use this breakdown of individual countries. So we combined all of that information together and had a look at who we thought might be benefiting from the new measures, who might struggle. And first of all, yes, you're not going to get away from the fact that this overall quota is coming down quite a lot. We're going down to, like I say, 5.8 million tons from just over, I think it was just over 11 or 12. So it's a big cut, but that's not shared equally. So countries like Turkey, for example, in this year they've got a quota of around about 1.6 million tons. If we apply all the same rules that are happening now to next year, that could fall down to about 633,000 tons. So a massive drop. Other countries who may have previously not had their own country quota may pick one up. So there are going to be some winners and losers in this.
Have you any idea who those winners and losers might be? You knew I was going to ask.
Of course I do. So where should we start? Winners?
Go for the winners.
Winners. Okay. So when we're looking at the numbers, we really sort of had to sort of decide exactly how we were going to categorize who were going to be winners and losers. And I think so. The numbers that we put together: Japan and Taiwan, two countries that are going to be moving out of the all-country quota and start picking up their own individual quota. And that's actually going to increase, according to our calculations. So Japan's going to go from around about 450,000 tons to around about 600,000 tons. So that's a big increase there. As well as that, Taiwan, that's going to, their quota, we're expecting that to increase by around about 100,000 tons as well. So by picking up their own individual country quota, we expect them to have larger volumes that they can bring in. Other winners are developing nations, or some of the developing nations that will go from being included in that all others list, who will now, because their imports were below a certain threshold, will now be exempt altogether. So we expect Algeria, Brazil, Indonesia, looking at those figures from 22 to 24, we expect them to now be exempt from tariffs completely.
Wow, it's a big change.
Yeah. So on the flip side, we've got losers. So I briefly mentioned Turkey. They are, I think they're the front and center, the biggest loser out of this. Certainly for hot rolled coil. For other product categories, the numbers are slightly different. But for hot rolled coil, certainly Turkey's our biggest loser. Like I say, their annual quota is coming down by nearly 1 million tons, which there's no getting past that. That's a huge number. Other losers, as it were South Korea. South Korea was on that list, and once again, that's because we're expecting their quota to reduce. Now, it's probably also going to affect Serbia and India. When we look to the numbers, we're expecting their quotas to reduce. But one thing they don't always do is they don't always use up all of their quota in the current regime. And I think for Serbia, if the volumes kind of stayed about the same, then they'd just about expect to not pick up that 50% tariff on that last bit of steel that's coming in. And then there was a couple of countries I was struggling to categorize. So I've called them ones to watch, and this is because there are sort of unique circumstances, I think, happening to these countries. So the first of these is Ukraine. Now, within the proposal, there was a particular clause which said that the Commission may exempt countries that are facing unprecedented security issues. And that's clearly meant at Ukraine. They're already exempt from quite a lot of quotas at the moment. So if that gets put in place from 26, it could be that they have the potential to ship a lot of material into Europe, which of course will help their reconstruction. Getting their industry back up and exporting into Europe could only be beneficial for them. Like I say, there's no final detail on that, but I think that clause was there, particularly there for them.
And you clearly have focused very much on hot rolled coil initially with these calculations. Am I right in thinking that there's also some clause within these proposals that other products could also be dragged into the safeguard measures, way beyond those that are already categorised?
Yeah, great question. Yeah. So what's currently happening is we're essentially just mapping the current product categories into new ones. There's very little change there. But as we saw in the US, there's concern that if you just apply tariffs to these finished steel products, people will start importing derivative steel. So steel that's been worked just that little bit further, so it falls outside of the HS codes. And the US is currently in a situation where they're opening up to steel producers in the US. They're opening up the ability to add new products to the 232 measures a couple of times a year. Now, we've seen a call from Eurometal asking for exactly the same thing, basically because of the same concerns. All that you need to do to skirt the measures is to bring in steel that's been worked slightly further, so that HS code is different. So that really ends up being sort of a challenge for steelmakers in Europe, and it kind of gives people an out. So another clause that was included in this proposal was the ability to potentially widen the measures to include new product categories, and I think that's where we may end up. Not necessarily to begin with, but I think that's where we may end up. A little bit like CBAM. Sorry, I had to put that in there.
I was about to mention it, so you.
Currently it covers steel products, but eventually it's going to be reviewed again, and it's going to the number of products that are included in there are going to increase. So I'd expect something similar with these new this new safeguard replacement.
So I was about to mention CBAM, and here it comes. I guess it's just an observation of the market in Europe at the moment. CBAM already seems to have paralysed a lot of people's import activity at this stage because they're uncertain about the level of charges that are going to come in the new year. Now there's this. I guess there are very few products really that people can consider importing and not be overly concerned about what could be very significant tariffs and duties now.
Yes, yeah. Up until a few years ago, we really only had to worry about the anti-dumping measures and the countervailing duties. Then the safeguards came along and applied a sort of a broad blanket, and then we've got CBAM. So yes, there is massive potential for tariffs being added as this material crosses the border, and it's going to be. I think we're going to turn into another one of these situations where trade patterns do end up changing in response to that. It's when it comes down to money at the end of the day, people are going to do that. There's so much steel being produced around the world that if you can source from somewhere else, if you can save, if you can negate one of these tariffs, you're potentially going to be making. That's the difference between making a profit and making a loss. So yeah, I expect that's going to happen.
Absolutely, but I guess what Europe now needs is some steel consumption. It needs that demand, because at the moment we've really not seen all this turmoil and uncertainty translate to higher prices. So I guess ultimately the economy needs to pick up. That's the solution to the steel price conundrum.
I mean, if you look at our forecasts currently for the next 12 months, we are expecting prices in Europe to increase. But that's really, like you say, it's all due to supply side issues. So it's all about these tariffs, about this uncertainty of where this steel is going to be sourced. And the European steel makers are pushing hard to fill this gap. We've already heard talk of some price rises just this month. What isn't there is the end user demand. And the question is, when's that going to come back? The question is when are we going to start seeing that pick up? Some of the forecasts I've seen suggest that we're going to see sort of a moderate pickup in 26. But I'd very like to actually see that happen.
Well, as you say, the MEPS forecasts are shedding a little bit of light on that at the moment through to the next 12 months. We're soon publishing the steel price outlook, which will provide a much
the 5-year forecast.
Longer picture, the 5-year forecast, indeed. So there are challenges involved in the formulation of that, I'm sure. But I guess ultimately, the thing that we should tell, speaking of steel listeners, is to keep an eye on MEPS steel market reviews and really just get that up-to-date information and put yourself in a position where you can react to that. That's the key.
That's it, yeah. So much is changing at the moment. So much new legislation will be coming out and applying to so many people that, yes, the only way really to keep up with that is to keep up with the podcast and with the MEPS publications.
Great stuff. Jon, thanks ever so much for joining me again in the studio, and we'll have you back soon. I think we've got a summary of the year coming up, so that'll be interesting.
Brilliant.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.